How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to AngelsBobs Plus here in Factorio. The final episode in the series. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. I know I have. So, in the last episode, we did a few things. Mainly in the last episode, we prepped for launch. So let's head over there, see that, let's get that going. And we'll do the factory tour after that. Figure we'll probably start at the intake of raw ore, and then kind of progress from there. If you guys are just joining us, make sure you guys head to the first couple episodes and kind of play catch up on the series, I suppose. I mean, I guess you could hop around on episodes. But if you want to watch kind of the full journey from start to finish, I believe the playlist is either linked below, or you should be able to just go to the playlist section on the channel and it should show you there. Oh, and I'm running into rocks already. This episode would have come out on Friday, but some things came up Thursday, and so I wasn't able to record, and then Friday things continued to back up, and so it was unable to happen for Saturday. So here it is, Sunday. Kind of a weird episode, but hey, at least it was able to make it out. So we are 25% of the way for the rocket progress, right? So I think what we're going to go ahead and do is more or less just kind of not necessarily push ourselves, but we're going to kind of speed some things along here. Oh, I also see a problem that I might have caused myself. Okay, so those rocket fuel doesn't go in there. Right. So the problem, in case you didn't notice it, was the loaders would not put the things in proper time. Okay, so now... Okay, so that should happen. Awesome. So hopefully by the time we finish factory tour, this should be ready. We do have the fish, right? Yes, we do have the fish to launch. We're going to launch it with the fish, because I don't have the satellites to do it. Yeah, it should be able to finish. Oh. Just take the bearings from me. Okay, well, the robots do their thing. Well, the robots do their thing. We're going to go ahead and go through. We'll just go through in this mode on the map. Makes it a little bit faster for us to kind of go around. Why is that? Yeah, why? Cause solder somehow is slowed? Yeah, pretty much nothing. Why? Because there's pretty much no lead. Interesting. Not sure why that is the case, unless it's... No, because that... I'm actually not entirely sure why there is. Whatever. That's not what we're here to take a look at. We're here to take a look at the factory. Okay. So starting off the factory tour, we pretty much started the base up here. Kind of in this junction area. So I figure this is pretty much where we should start out anyway, right? So, ore comes in, right? So we have our train stations here. One for each of the ores. Not all of them were needed in the playthrough, however, they are all able to function if we did end up needing them. So this far left one is for sapphirite, this one is steatite, this one's bobmonium. I believe this one was for rubyite, this was for javolite, and this one was crotinium, and then this one was for coal. Technically, I have done liquid trains before in other playthroughs, depending on the placement of the oil, depending on the placement of the thermal water and the natural gas. Luckily, in our generation of the world, they all pretty much ended up being right next to each other, which worked out very, very well. I also opted to not really do any sort of long-term storage for anything other than like a few items, just because I have in previous playthroughs done storage for every single intermediate product, and it gets quite intensive, especially when you want to store that much liquid, and then you have to handle overflows and pipe and throughput issues, and it just doesn't end up working, unfortunately. Direct insertion, and we'll go through that more in a little bit. It just makes more sense. So in our case here, we had, let's see, how many train outposts do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we ended up with 5 train outposts, right? Yeah. And so in a couple instances, so like the coal, for instance, was just by itself. But then for crotinium, we had 2. We had 2 trains. And then we did one for bobmonium, and then we did one for steatite. And then for the most part, we just belted in the other ore that we needed. So the bobmonium here, some javolite up top. Let's see, we had some sapphirite. And so the design I used for pretty much all the mining outposts were kind of an underground compact version. I never actually used any of the higher tier miners. We used all the basic vanilla ones. So this is technically a vanilla compatible blueprint that I used. Basic power poles, yellow belt. As you can see, you can upgrade the belt more to handle more throughput. And then we just did a basic 8 to 8 balancer. It was just the smallest one I had that fit this many belts. Now you could do a 4 to 2 balancer, or a 8 to 2, or a 16 to 2 even, depending on how large of an ore patch you're dealing with. So the next step from the trains, or rather from the outpost went the trains came here into the depot, and then each of the depots unloaded into storage. Now this was designed with scalability in mind, and so that's why there was the space. So if I wanted to, I could space out here, right? And then I could go ahead and put loaders like that. And so then as needed, I could have, say, although it would take from here, I could move this to this one, right? So then it would force the ore into this one and then into this one. Or you could space it one more like this, and then you could signal this middle belt with another one that feeds. So this is where you can get into weird signaling to make things very complicated, right? So what I could have done as well is, if you want to scale the storage, which is again what this was designed for, you could put circuit here, 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 and then on these two to basically read how much ore you have, and then whether or not really you don't, I guess you don't need here, but you put circuits here and here onto this warehouse, and basically you'd only turn this one on and then any subsequent ones on to refill this one if this one became low for whatever reason. But otherwise it would always output, right? And so that way the storage would fill up, and then if we needed more here, right, if the demand over here in the refining area called for more ore, then it could push more that way without you having to manually swap anything. The lazy man approach, and probably the approach I more than likely would have done without doing anything with wiring, would have been me just moving these 2 inserters, or not, I don't know why I always call them inserters, but these 2 loaders, and just slap them on the last warehouse in the storage. Now there is storage over here for coal, so coal did go into its own area. I have done much larger dedicated coal storages before, but honestly I figure with 4 warehouses here at the depot and then 1 here, there was plenty of coal. I guess, do we go from coal or do we go from the ore? I guess coal, because coal doesn't really go. Yeah, I guess the next journey is coal, right? So this is probably one of the next, if not the first systems somebody would set up. So I had partitioned out enough room for 1, 2, 3 belts worth of boilers and steam engines to allow for plenty of power for quite a long time. I never ended up actually building the 3rd row, nor did I ever ended up actually upgrading any of the boilers or steam engines, but by all means you could have, had you for whatever reason needed to, or rather wanted to, I suppose. Take in mind though that this many boilers will require pretty much red belt all the way through, and in order to maintain that you can pick up off of red belt, you do have to have kind of some shenangling going on. So that's kind of what we did here. So the reason the first one has burner inserters is so that way they can fuel themselves in the event of a total blackout, right? So there's no power in the system. Nothing has power. Belts luckily run without power. The burner inserter will take fuel from the belt, fuel itself, and then fuel the boiler. With the very rare exceptions that for whatever reason the boiler, or not the boiler, the burner inserter runs out of fuel mid-animation, right? So it gets stuck. But hopefully one of the other inserters, through just redundancy, just through the sheer amount, the likelihood that all of them got stuck in an animation that caused them to be basically out of fuel and the whole system would die. And this is assuming you're pre-solar, right? So you don't have any solar panels to rely on, and pre-nuclear, so you don't have any of that. And obviously if you're modded, then pre any of the other modded power sources that are out there. So this system basically allows for enough redundancy, so should the system go in a total blackout, the burner inserters should, again, keyword should, be able to hopefully restart the system. Again, another should coal be reintroduced into the system, or if you hand prime it, right, you go through and you put wood and everything, or whatever fuel you're using. It is important to note though that the burner inserters won't be able to pull off of red belt if it's fully moving, right? So if this was constantly moving, they would not be able to pull off of it. However, my intention is for them not to necessarily be able to pull off of it. So say they were fast enough to pull off of red, I don't want them to pull off of here, just for the sole reason of I want the coal to have a chance to go all the way down and then start backing up. And then, right, so I want these boilers to turn on first. There's not really a particular reason for that. I just choose that idea more, I suppose. And the reason there's a second set of inserters, and the reason they don't directly insert into the boiler and they insert into the burner inserter, is because it's to basically just be my reset. So it's in the event, right? So it's in the event that the burner inserter ran out of fuel, is stuck in that animation, right? So it needs fuel, but it can't fuel itself. And there's no power in the grid. Well, hopefully one of the other burner inserters is able to put fuel in its boiler, and then some power gets generated, and then the inserter can pick up a piece of coal and reset the burner inserter, right? So it's basically like kind of a redundancy. It's, I don't know, maybe an alternator, I suppose. Recharging the car battery. So, yeah. I don't have that on all the systems, only the first one, because if you wanted to, I suppose you could put this specific blueprint on all 3. I chose not to. I only chose to put it on the first one. Let's see, where does coal go from here? Coal goes upwards, which we'll take a look at PetroChem, I think, a little bit later. I want to kind of keep following where the ore goes. The other place coal goes is down over here to make carbon for a lot of the different systems throughout the factory. And of course, we'll take another kind of a more in-depth look at this as well once we get closer to that. The next step on our journey would be probably so we went from ore storage, so we follow all the production lines, so it takes it over here, and it heads here to this pretty massive complex of things. Sorry for the sniffles in advance. I have cats and I'm allergic to them. They were not my idea originally, although they are fluffy and furry and fun, I suppose. So the ore comes in, and at each step it goes into a warehouse. So we'll just take a look at one of these. We'll take a look at the sapphirite because that is the only one that is fully complete. However, the rest of them are also the same, just with slightly modifications, and we'll take a look at those slight modifications. So in our case, the sapphirite will go in. In this specific instance, our sapphirite's coming from the ore patch down here and being directly fed in. Otherwise, it's no different than any of the others. All of them do have these gates that prevent any more than 10,000 ore to be stored in the production line at any one time, and this is just to give us a small buffer of ore should the belt run dry, or should for whatever reason the belt not be a full belt, or a full two yellow belt in, and so in which case there's some buffer there. It's also to prevent this from filling up, because the design I opted for was kind of an omni sorting method, because there's so many different products you have to deal with when refining ore that I just didn't feel like having an inserter on each machine for each output would just make sense. And so I've opted for just putting everything into the warehouse and then using the warehouse to separate things, especially with very high stack sizes. I believe we're playing with 1.2 thousand as our stack size modifier. I could be wrong on that. Of course, depending on what you're playing with, if you're playing on, say, only 100 as your stack size limit, or maybe even 500, again, it just depends. Your system might look a little bit different. And so our raw ore goes in. We can follow it here on the red belt. Red belt is just to maintain pretty much one red belt in, one red belt out in terms of the intermediate products, not necessarily the final products such as the iron and copper and things. So the raw ore comes in, again, another limiter. We want to limit this one as well to only 10,000. And then we also have limiters on the inputs here as well for the first stage. So the first stage of ore refinement is crushing. And so we put the ore in crushed stone, and the crushed ore come out. Those both go back into the machine. And of course we have gates to limit how much comes in. So that way, again, this machine or this warehouse doesn't fill up, and then the subsequent downstream warehouses also don't fill up. So then a side note is we do take out some of the crushed sapphirite for use in direct ore sorting, and we'll hit that area a little bit later on. So up next, we have hydro refining, and the process here is basically we combine purified water with the crushed ore, and we get a chunk out, right? So we kind of get these blobs of kind of goop coming out, and then also a byproduct of, in this case, sulfuric wastewater, but we could also be producing hydrofluoric wastewater, chloric wastewater, and nitric wastewater, which of course all get refined in very, very similar processes, and their byproducts also get used in subsequent recipes. So pretty much the same idea, right? So we have limiters on how much of what we can have stored at any one time, so nothing backs up, so that we can keep these warehouses flowing. They do have a very high capacity of 768 slots, but we want to maintain that ore and other products can flow through. And same thing as the previous one, we also have a little bit of a skim coming off of the chunks, just so that way those can also be used in direct ore refinement. So as we follow our journey upwards again, we hit the next stage. So we are making crystals now, I believe, from these, or maybe these are the chunks. we're making the next stage of refining. So basically, again, limiters, same process. We don't have really limiters here, but that's partially because we're at the final stage. And so these are pretty much directly all getting sent upstream. And there's no other products that these produce. And again, same thing. We're pulling off for direct ore sorting. In this case, we basically combined an acid with those chunks we made in the hydro refining. And so then those create chunks. Or crystals. Actually, what are they called? Are they called chunks or crystals? I can never remember. Chunks are the blobs. The actual hard things are the crystals. Okay, so these are crystals. Okay. Got it. This area is not under radar, but essentially it's the same process. We plug things in, but in these cases, we don't have any other ore or any other things, and then the sulfuric acid is used here in the the leaching process. As for the slight differences in the others, it just comes down to the liquids used and the byproducts created. So they all produce crushed stone, and they all produce a geode of some kind at this stage, at the the flotation cell, which is the hydro refining stage. And so the byproducts basically all flow downhill. So the final end product that we want to sort, and then the geode, and then in this case, the crushed stone and the geode flow down, and those get sorted here into where they need to go, right? Think of it like a mail sorter. And then the purified crystals in this case go into our ore sorting facility, and this is what sorts our multitude. We also get a little bit of slag. Well, actually, we only get the slag if we're refining pretty much anything that is not the purified ore, right? So if we're doing crystal sorting, chunk sorting, or ore sorting, the basic ore, we get some slag, right? So it's not quite a purified process, and so we're going to get a little bit of that kind of byproduct. However, if we have purified, we no longer get the slag. So eventually, if you stay with this design, you can eventually remove your slag line. I do have a little bit of stone being made here, just as a byproduct here, to make some landfill, and then also make some stone brick over here. So pretty much all of them are the same. Sapphire makes copper in a 1-to-2 ratio, or in a 2-to-1 ratio, so twice as much iron to copper. Stereotype's the opposite. It does twice as much copper to iron. Bombonium doesn't make iron or copper. Rubyite doesn't make iron or copper, but they do have other ore byproducts such as gold, tin, zinc, silicon, silver, all very useful things. And even the sapphire makes other byproducts, right? So it does titanium, tungsten, quartz, maybe? I can't remember what that one is. And so pretty much the refining here is all basically more or less the same. So some of our supporting systems we have the production of all the acids we need. But before we look at that, we need to look at the byproducts we were getting earlier. So the byproducts we get are things such as the sulfuric wastewater, more sulfuric wastewater, some nitric wastewater. We do get chloric wastewater. Maybe. We should be getting chloric wastewater. Yes, there is some chloric wastewater, but it's not currently being produced because the system is turned off, because the system is full of crushed. So some things might have happened, and that's why things aren't moving. But those are, yeah, things have stopped here, but luckily they're not too detrimental to us. Yet actually parts of the factory will have probably shut down because of that. Hopefully nothing relating to the rocket. Anyway, so the wastewaters get sent to these water purifiers, and they produce these solids. In this case, we get sulfur from pretty much half, and then we get some other components. I don't know what these two are off the top of my head. And then they head up here, and then we make acid out of them. So we make our basic sulfuric acid, which is used in quite a lot of recipes. So that's why we have so much more of it being made versus I believe this is hydrofluoric acid. And then we have nitric acid. as well. So we basically combine the sulfuric acid with the other two byproducts to get these. From here, we can head, I suppose, now to the outputs. So we'll take a look back at our sapphirite. So our sapphirite produces iron, copper, some other ore, slag, crushed stone, and geodes. So all of that comes here onto our kind of our other bus. So the iron heads up here to the iron warehouse, the copper goes to its own warehouse, and then everything else heads downward. So let's take a look at that really quick. So the other ore proceeds down into our mega sorter here, and so it's going to sort all the different ores into all of their different warehouses respectively, and then proceed downward and to go into each of the refining processes for that particular ore. Now I'm not going to go through every single production here, but for the most part these are all of them. So like tin, solder, bronze, silicon, aluminum, lead, brass, titanium, cobalt steel, tungsten, chrome, gold, and nitinol, right? And so there are more than this, but these are just the ones we needed, or at least the ones we used. As for the slag and the crushed stone and the geodes, those flow over here. So they flow down to the kind of this area. So the crushed stone basically has been existing in this long-term storage. I have pretty much not ever used it this playthrough. The slag, however, we were converting into mineral catalyst for direct ore sorting, and then the geodes get processed over here to get basically turned into crystals for module use. Some of the supporting things we have for modules are massive fish farm, and then we have a mix of concrete and brick being made over here, along with some scattering of some support facilities that you might see randomly placed by water. So let's go to the direct ore sorting now. So the direct ore sorting is basically just as it sounds. So instead of sorting like up here, where we sort a piece of sapphirite, purified ore, and we can get kind of a multitude of ores, direct sorting basically takes a little bit of everything, and we only get one ore, right? So we get to basically choose, hey, I just want copper, so we're only going to produce copper from here. We can also produce other ores like tin. Tin's one we are producing, but other than those two, we didn't end up actually producing any other ores directly, but you can produce all the ores directly if you want to. And honestly, I find it really nice to do, because eventually you could change over your refining area to just scale to what you need, right? And so instead of getting all these other byproducts that do fill up warehouses, right? So when everything's working, this blue belt is completely full of ore, and these warehouses will fill up very quickly. We can actually probably find, yeah, here's one. Nickel. Don't really use it. It's not used in a lot of things, and so this is something that would build up. However, if we were direct ore sorting all of our ores, well, we could say, hey, the warehouse is full, no more nickel will be made. But with the kind of the other type of sorting that we're doing up here in the kind of the basic refining, then we're getting a lot of extra ore that we don't really need, and it's going to clog things up, especially if it backs up. One of the more advanced ore sorting techniques is where we take, as you can see, multi-stage items, right? So we take the crushed, we take the chunks, we take the crystals, and we combine them with different acids and different chemicals, basically. And on the output side, we get some special ore. So we get chrome and manganese. And then we do get a little bit of iron, a little bit of cobalt, a little bit of nickel, but mainly we want the chrome and the manganese. Another one of those ore outposts. And so then those, of course, go to their respective areas, which are in the other ore smelting area. So now as for the iron and the copper, which probably 90% of you are very familiar with, especially from vanilla. They are the two main ores in vanilla. Really, they're the only ores aside, I guess, from stone, coal, uranium, and I think it's stone, coal, and uranium. So the iron makes iron gear wheels. The iron also makes steel gear wheels, which is a much lengthier process, as you can see just from those two. This is actually one of the older iron designs we used, and then kind of one of the more updated iron designs we're currently using is right here. This was, of course, one of the older copper ones we're using, or did use, and we only ended up actually using one steel refining area. As for the copper, I eventually got fed up with just not ever having enough, so I went overboard and made 4 red belts of copper. Yeah. If you see or have seen anything that you want a blueprint of and you either can't make it out in the video, if you can't pause, let me know in the comment section down below, and I will try to get a blueprint of it if I haven't already. There will be a blueprint book of at least the blueprints I think most people will want. But of course, if there's anything you didn't see in there or you didn't see in the video, right? So if I didn't cover, say, I don't know, this obscure mining outpost, let me know, and I will try to go get a blueprint of it if I remember. Let's see. I think that brings us, I guess we can cover this really quick. So up here we have this also slight note before we continue. This episode will be a little bit longer than regular. So if you want, you guys can just skip ahead for the rocket launch. That should be near the end of the video. So yeah, back into the factory tour. So we need wood. Wood is very integral into circuit production. It is the basic base for the tier 0 or tier 1 circuits, depending on how you want to look at it. It's also what we use to produce the wires here. Well, it's used to make resin, which ends up being made into wiring. Once we make copper wire and then tinned copper wire. Some of the other ore, the reason that this ore is here is it gets used up in catalyst land, way up in the PetroChem area, which will cover the PetroChem once we cover the... we'll cover the PetroChem probably next, I suppose. So the next major component, right? So everything gets refined. So all the gears, all the iron, the copper, the steel, the multitude of different ores we smelted, and then kind of any of the miscellaneous things that we need to put on the bus, get put on the bus. This bus is by no means a true characteristic of how big a bus should be, nor is it a true characteristic of what your bus will look like, because everybody has different needs for their factories, and every factory is a little bit different. Now, did I need this much steel? Probably not. I probably could have cut it down to a single lane and just made sure it was the most upgraded belt I had. Did I need this much iron? Probably not. I probably could have cut it down to 2 lanes. As you can see, I didn't end up using 2 of the lanes up top for gears, so I could have easily combined the iron up there and probably could have shrunk the overall thickness of the bus probably by at least 1 or 2 rows, and a row being defined as 4 belts. And then it just comes down to your preference, right? I probably could have even looked at making other items on site, such as the circuits, but it just depends. So I put science at the start of every bus I do. I put all my labs at the start of it, just because I feel like it's a good anchor. It's somewhere I'm never gonna really touch. It's somewhere I'm never gonna really rework. It's pretty much gonna stay tried and true. Labs go here, science goes in, science happens. Pretty much it. Usually the first couple starts of my bus are red science, basic circuits, and then some sort of infrastructure automation, just so that I can build the rest of the factory. Once I hit green science is kind of where I start to take off with things, at least until I hit the wall of blue science. And then once I hit blue science, it starts to turn less of a sprint and more into a crawl. At least that's what it feels like in my opinion. But getting the yellow and purple sciences are fairly easy, I think, at least. Although making sure that they're properly fed and maintained is a little bit of a challenge, as can be illustrated here. Partially because not everything here is ratioed out perfectly. Some things are, but only in a small localized scale, so not in the factory scale. And by that I mean, so something might be, for instance, this end part to make these circuits, the final tier of circuits, everything locally is scaled properly, right? So there's enough tinned copper wire, there's enough silver or gilded copper wire, I believe is what the gold one is, and silver copper wire or silver wire. So everything locally there's enough of. However, globally, in terms of making sure that there's enough, say, red circuits for this, it is not ratioed for that. So I do apologize in advance for if you were trying to replicate any of these builds thinking that you could just plug and play with what you had. You can just realize that it's not going to be ratioed more than likely to scale with however your factory goes. So just double check to see if you have Helmod. I highly recommend it, as it makes trying to ratio things out incredibly nicely. And then that brings us, we didn't really utilize robots a whole lot in this base. Part of the reason for that is I just never got around to it. They can be used and utilized. I did start to utilize them more near the end, when, especially when you start to get builds, for instance, like not circuits, modules, where you need all these little components like transistors, basic electronic components, basic circuit boards, casings, module boards, stuff like that, where you don't really want to bring in 9 belts to try to feed into one assembler, and just having a chest makes it so much easier, and the robots really help. And all things considered, robots are really UPS friendly if you scale them far enough into the game. In the old days of Factorio, they were the only way to play the end game, but belts have been optimized significantly since the early days of Factorio, that's for sure. And so endgame belt bases, as you can see here, are viable. Are we losing a little FPS here and there? We are, but for the most part, it is a safe, viable way to play the game. The reason I say they are pretty much infinitely scalable is because belts have a finite limit, whereas robots you can effectively research indefinitely with their speed and cargo capacity. Again, at least here in modded, you can, in theory, research also higher tiers of robots. So there's like tier 2 robots that are just base better, right? So they just are faster to begin with. They can carry more to begin with. They have a bigger charge to begin with, things like that. Missing. Okay, so it's continuing. We'll take a look and see what its progress is here. Soon, 60%. What does it still need? It needs these. How can I get you more of these? We're going to take a look really quick. The rocket shall launch. Okay, it needs more of these. What do you need to make more of these? More solder. Okay, all the solder is coming to this. Okay, let's go ahead and fix this really quick. Would not be a Factorio episode if I didn't forget to do something, such as making sure the rocket was ready to launch. Too late now. And we're going to set all these to output priority right. So that all solder goes. Alright, so that should be plenty of solder from there. The blue circuits will starve a little bit. They are an integral part of these circuits, unfortunately, so it's one of those kind of catch-22s, I suppose. But hopefully, I guess not. These don't need blue circuits. These do though, but there should be enough built up on the bus that everything should work just fine. And let's drive through there. Oh yeah. And hop out. Awesome. Alright, so let's continue the final little section, right? And that is PetroChem. PetroChem is a little bit of a nightmare if you play with it. Anybody who's played Minecraft, I would say it's a good comparison to, say, an old mod called Greg Tech, which basically made all the recipes in Minecraft infinitely harder. I do know one of the more recent mods is called Advanced Crafting for Minecraft, and it basically allows for crafting tables, I believe 5 by 5 and then 7 by 7, and then I want to say there's even a 10 by 10, or it might be an 11 by 11. I'm not sure what the largest size of those crafting tables are. So earlier we saw that the coal and then some other ore went north from over here from power, right? So we kind of hit this junction. Well, coal goes into this massive coconator, is kind of what I call it. It's also kind of what a few people have called similar designs to this. And basically what it does is its main function is to make coke. Well, it also happens to make a lot of sulfuric acid or sulfur as a byproduct. So basically coal comes in, it heads over here to get crushed. The crushed coal goes in, crushed coal goes out and gets turned into coke. The byproduct of coke takes a little bit of purified water and the crushed coal go in, coke and sulfuric wastewater comes out. The sulfuric wastewater gets processed the same way it got processed in the other area for the acid, and to make sulfuric acid, the coke goes in and the coke goes down to power, because that's literally the only place I possibly could think of to use this much coke, because I mainly wanted the sulfuric acid. It's a kind of an expensive way of doing it, but hey. Here we have kind of the ends of all that ore we saw, where it was going, and here's where it's going to make catalyst. Catalysts are used in different various reactions in order to allow for them to happen. You might see a few machines like this that, oh wait, no, these do have recipes, never mind. You might have actually still seen a few machines throughout the factory who don't have any recipes that are kind of like these ones. That was because somewhere along the line a mod or something updated, and I had to change certain machines over to different machines to do the same recipe. So there's not really a whole lot of rhyme or reason as to which order I did things in. So things that have pipe that go down, basically a vertical pipe like this, are something that aren't a part of a chain, but if it only has a little bit, starts with it, and then doesn't really have any for a while, well, it's because those are part of a production chain. So like all these water purifiers and electrolyzers are all part of a big chain to make plastic, right? So the end goal was liquid plastic, which we are still only using the basic tier, and we're not using the bioprocessing, and we're not using any of the higher tiers. Some oil, some different gas refinement, and then kind of, I think one of the big ones was making liquid resin. And then I think the next large one we did was making rocket fuel. So we really only have 1, 2, 3, 4 PetroChem recipes up here with maybe a few other like end products, right? I do want to clarify that. So we have pretty much 4 end product items in here. Now there are some others that we probably don't really need, but there's really only 4. So those being liquid plastic, liquid resin, rocket fuel, and then nitric acid. Everything else you see is for intermediate products we need to get that end result. So it's quite a lot. And there's, for instance, here with the amount of electrolyzers we have, there are quite a few recipes that require very large amounts of just stuff to be made. There are quite a few solids as well that are involved, such as coal, carbon, and then residual like byproducts basically. So anybody who knows anything about oil refinement should know that there is some byproducts that get produced, and that's basically what these are, in a very, very simplified way. Although most of the chemicals and kind of chemistry that goes on here is somewhat accurate. I would give it probably about an 80% accuracy rating, at least from what I remember from high school chemistry. So let's take a look now at the rocket. 61%. No, you were supposed to be much further along. Damn you. Okay, well, it looks like things are progressing a little bit faster. Alright. So I think what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to pause the recording. You guys won't notice anything other than that this is going to suddenly fill up for you. So that way you guys don't have to wait around. So yeah, I will see you guys in like 20 seconds. And we are back. For you, that was instantaneous. For me, it was like 20 minutes. This is what happens when we were ill prepared. But the rocket is ready. Are you ready? 'Cause I certainly am. Gotta zoom out for this thing. Shit, there it goes. Yay! We did it! Awesome. I hope everybody enjoyed the series. If you guys did, make sure you guys smash that thumbs up button. I'd really appreciate it. If you haven't already, smash the subscribe button as well while you're down there. And you know what? Turn on the bell notifications so you don't miss out on any future episodes of anything, really. And the next season of things will probably be converting this into a Mega Base, but that will be a new series. Not sure when that will come out, but the next series we're gonna do is probably Minecraft of some kind in modded land. I don't know. We'll see what comes out Monday. On that, have a good one, guys. I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.